My name is Emily Carter. I'm 36, an interior designer in Nashville, and for years people around me thought I had it all figured out. A career I loved, a small but respected design studio, and a husband who looked like the perfect partner on paper. Brian Carter, 39, production manager at an advertising agency, dressed sharp, always had a story about late-night shoots or industry events. To our neighbors in Green Hills, we were the polished couple with the tidy lawn, the fresh paint, and the occasional catered barbecue. The truth was, I played my part well. At block parties, I smiled, I poured the wine, I listened to Brian tell stories about celebrity clients and long shoots. People would glance at me and say things like, "You must be so proud of him," as if my role in the marriage was to stand there and nod. I'd laugh politely, but deep down, a little part of me wanted to scream that I wasn't just his sidekick. I had built a business too. My studio wasn't some hobby. It kept us comfortable. Brian liked the spotlight though. He thrived on it. He was the kind of guy who would linger in conversations, dropping names, hinting at stressful deadlines, making himself sound indispensable. At first, I found it charming, even exciting. Over the years though, it started to feel rehearsed. Like he was acting the role of Brian the successful husband, rather than just being himself with me. At home, our rhythm looked fine from the outside. We shared the chores, we planned vacations, we had dinner together most nights when he wasn't traveling, but it wasn't as effortless as it had once been. Conversations grew shallow, filled with schedules and quick updates rather than the kind of connection we used to have. Sometimes he'd come home late, looking worn out, and I'd ask about his day. His answers were vague. Long meetings, chaotic crew, you know how it is. And I'd nod, even when I didn't know. What people never see in those picture-perfect suburban lives is the silence. The little moments at night when you're lying next to someone you've known for more than a decade, and you wonder if they ever lie awake thinking about you, or if they're just glad you're quiet so they can drift off. I'll admit, I didn't want to face it. I wanted to believe that a marriage that looked this solid couldn't really be cracking. After all, we had no screaming matches, no slammed doors, no public blow-ups, but cracks don't always announce themselves. Sometimes they spread slowly, under the surface, until one day you're staring at something so small, so ordinary, that you can't pretend anymore. Looking back, I realize I'd been ignoring signs for months. Brian had started taking his phone everywhere, even into the bathroom. He'd put it face down on the table instead of leaving it unlocked the way he used to. He shaved more often, started picking clothes with more care, even when he claimed he was only going to the office. All these little things, I brushed off. I told myself he was just busy, just tired, just different. But the first real crack came on a Saturday morning, in the middle of what should have been a normal weekend. I was making coffee in the kitchen, scrolling through my phone, when he walked in looking groggy. No good morning kiss, just a hand reaching for his phone, like it was the oxygen mask on a crashing plane. I teased him, said something about how he was glued to that thing. He forced a laugh, said, "You know it's my job." Then he asked me why I looked tense, and I gave my usual answer, "I'm fine." That's the thing about long marriages. You start saying, "I'm fine." So often it becomes its own language. What it really meant was, "I don't believe you, but I don't have proof. Not yet." And that's when I realized how fragile my so-called perfect life really was. It wasn't going to be one big dramatic moment that exposed the truth. It was going to be something small, something ordinary, something I almost missed. Because sometimes the thing that blows open a marriage isn't a screaming fight or a dramatic confession. It's a half-empty bottle sitting in your own bathroom, quietly daring you to ask the question you've been avoiding. Before I tell you what that bottle meant, let me pause right here. If you're watching this, drop a comment down below. Have you ever noticed something small in a relationship that later turned out to mean everything? And if you enjoy stories about cheating, revenge, and the messy truths behind marriages, make sure you hit subscribe so you don't miss what comes next. Back to that Saturday morning, standing in the kitchen with my coffee cup, watching Brian scroll through emails like I wasn't even there. The little details were starting to pile up, and I was finally paying attention. The house was still, the sunlight sharp across the counter, and I knew something was off. My life wasn't about to collapse all at once, It was already collapsing, one overlooked detail at a time. I carried my coffee into the bathroom, trying to shake off the tension from that morning. The steam from the shower still lingered, which was odd because I hadn't used it yet. I hung my robe on the hook, reached for the sink to rinse out my cup, and that's when I saw it. The shampoo bottle. My shampoo. The one Brian never touched because he claimed it smelled like a forest floor after rain, his exact words, the first time I brought it home. It sat on the shower shelf, tilted slightly, lighter than it should have been. I picked it up without really thinking. I'd bought it just last week. When I tilted the bottle, the liquid sloshed down too easily, the weight off, unmistakably less than it should be. I froze. This wasn't the kind of thing you convince yourself about. Either you've used it or you haven't. I set it back down, stared at it, then picked it up again. Same feeling. Too light. I didn't say anything when Brian passed by the doorway a few minutes later. He called out something about grabbing breakfast, and I just said, okay, trying to sound normal. But I stood there in that bathroom, staring at a plastic bottle as if it had just whispered the truth. Now, let's be clear. A half-empty shampoo bottle doesn't scream cheating. It's not lipstick on a collar, not a hotel receipt. But it was wrong. It was out of place. And sometimes what unsettles you isn't the big, obvious thing, it's the little thing that doesn't fit. I sat at the kitchen table, pushing scrambled eggs around my plate, while Brian scrolled through his phone. Rough night? I asked, testing him. He didn't even look up. Just late meetings. You know how New York trips are. Sure, I knew. Or at least, I thought I did. That day, I couldn't focus on work. I sat at my desk sketching layouts for a client's condo renovation, but the shampoo kept coming back into my head. I knew how much was in that bottle because I used it every other day, always the same 2 pumps. And Brian had never, in 16 years, touched it. He stuck to his boring, unscented body wash like it was holy water. So who had used it? The more I tried to brush it off, the more it nagged at me. The bottle wasn't empty enough to mean I'd miscalculated. It was off just enough to tell me that someone else's hands had been in my shower. That night, I casually asked Brian if he had taken a shower after coming home late. He blinked, caught off guard. Yeah, I did. Why? Just wondering, I said, and turned back to my book. My heart was pounding, but I kept my face still. He nodded and went back to his phone. The next morning, I checked again. The bottle was even lighter. I tilted it in my hand, and my stomach dropped. This wasn't in my head. Something was happening in my own house, and I couldn't ignore it anymore. When I told Claire about it later that week, she didn't laugh. She didn't say I was overthinking. She leaned forward across the cafe table, lowered her voice, and said, Emily, you know what this means. I don't want to jump to conclusions, I said. Then don't jump. Just pay attention, she answered. If you notice it, it's for a reason. Trust yourself. I walked out of that cafe with my nerves buzzing. I'd wanted her to dismiss it, to tell me I was being ridiculous. Instead, she had confirmed the thing I didn't want to admit. Something was off. At home, I started watching more closely. Towels left damp when I knew I hadn't showered. A faint scent of perfume I didn't own. Brian shaving on days he was supposedly just working in the office. All these tiny pieces added up to something I couldn't unsee. That night, when Brian slid into bed beside me, he kissed my shoulder like nothing was wrong. I lay there with my eyes open, listening to his steady breathing, and thought, if this is what betrayal feels like, it doesn't come with fireworks. It comes with shampoo bottles and damp towels. The next morning, I stood in the bathroom again, staring at that half-empty bottle. My hand tightened around it, my reflection staring back at me in the mirror. I didn't know where this was leading, but I knew one thing. This was no coincidence. And once you see something like that, you can't unsee it. I set the shampoo bottle back down and stepped away, but my mind wouldn't let it go. The doubt had already moved in, and once it's there, it starts rearranging the furniture in your head. Every little thing became suspicious. Every routine detail felt like a puzzle piece that didn't quite fit. The first thing I noticed was the towels. I'm the kind of person who keeps track of laundry without realizing it. When I left a clean towel folded on the rack in the morning, I expected it to be there that night, untouched, unless I had used it. But twice that week, I found one of my light blue towels damp and hanging crooked, like someone had used it in a rush. Brian always used the dark gray towels I bought specifically for him. He claimed mine smelled too flowery. Yet here was one of mine, wet, wrinkled, and reeking faintly of my rosemary shampoo. Then there was the perfume. Not mine. Not the lotions or candles I kept in the house either. It was faint, but it lingered in the hallway one night after Brian claimed he'd worked late. A sweet, fruity scent I couldn't place. I stood there, breathing it in, my chest tight, knowing damn well no one but the two of us should have been inside. Brian's behavior didn't help. He was more protective of his phone than a teenager hiding TikTok from their parents. It was always face down, always in his pocket, even when he went to the bathroom. If I walked into the room, he tilted the screen away. When I asked what he was doing, he'd brush it off with a vague, work emails. At first, I didn't press, but when you add damp towels and disappearing shampoo to the equation, work emails doesn't cut it. I tried to calm myself by focusing on work. Carter and Lane Interiors had a big project downtown, a luxury condo remodel for a wealthy couple who argued over marble countertops like it was life and death. Normally, I love diving into details, sketching layouts, arguing about light fixtures. But even at client meetings, my mind wandered back to that stupid bottle in the shower. I kept thinking, what else have I missed? So I started paying attention in ways I hadn't before. I wrote things down. Dates, times, little changes. I kept a notebook in my bag. Nothing dramatic. Just a small black one where I could jot notes without Brian noticing. Tuesday. Shampoo lower again. Towels damp. Brian home late. Said traffic. Thursday. Perfume smell faint in hallway. No explanation. Friday. Brian shaved in the morning, even though he was working from home. One night, while Brian was out, I walked through the house as if I were a guest. I studied the details like I would in a client's home, looking for signs of use. In the guest bathroom, the soap looked freshly used. In the kitchen, a glass sat drying that wasn't mine. I hadn't touched it, and I knew my own dishes. These weren't smoking guns, but they were breadcrumbs. The more I wrote down, the more it felt real. I wasn't going crazy. I wasn't inventing things. Something was happening right under my nose, and the evidence was stacking up. I tried talking myself out of it at night. Lying in bed, I'd tell myself, maybe he decided to use my shampoo after all. Maybe he just grabbed the wrong towel. Maybe a coworker hugged him goodbye, and that's why he smelled like perfume. Maybe. But the maybes never lined up. They clashed. They contradicted. And when Brian rolled over and muttered, "You're too tense lately, Em," I wanted to laugh. He had no idea how tense I really was. The suspicion didn't make me loud. It made me quiet. I watched more, said less. I noticed Brian trimming his beard more often, changing his shirts twice in a day, suddenly caring about how his jeans fit. I'd compliment him just to see how he reacted. Sometimes he smiled too quickly, like he'd been waiting to be noticed. Other times, he brushed it off, like he didn't want to give me a reason to look closer. One Saturday, Claire came by with coffee. She noticed the stack of notes on my counter, pages of sketches mixed with a few lines of scribbled times and dates. She raised an eyebrow but didn't press. When I finally blurted out the thing about the shampoo, her expression turned serious. "You're not imagining this," she said flatly. I wanted her to tell me I was paranoid. I wanted her to laugh it off. But instead, she leaned in, her voice low. "Emily, you need to stop giving him the benefit of the doubt. Pay attention. If it's nothing, you'll know. But if it's something, you'll be glad you didn't ignore it." That stuck with me. Pay attention. So I did. I started memorizing the weight of the shampoo bottle each time I used it. I knew the exact spot my towel hung, the way the bathroom smelled after my shower. And every time something was off, I wrote it down. Brian thought he was living in two separate worlds. His work, his late nights, his locked phone, and the home life where I stayed silent and supportive. What he didn't realize was that the walls between those two worlds were paper thin and the cracks were widening. One evening, as I folded laundry, I caught sight of his shirt collar. A faint smudge of makeup, not mine, not anything I owned. I ran my finger across it, heart racing, and added another line to the notebook. It wasn't proof, not yet. But I was building a case, piece by piece. And once you start keeping score, you don't stop. I closed the notebook and shoved it into my bag before Claire noticed I'd been writing again, but she wasn't fooled. She had known me since college, long enough to read my face like it was a billboard. She stirred her coffee slowly, her eyes not leaving mine. "Emily," she said, "you're cataloging things, aren't you?" I didn't bother denying it. Instead, I sighed and rubbed my temples. I can't shake this feeling. Something isn't right. But it sounds insane, right? Who obsesses over a shampoo bottle? Claire set her cup down with a soft thud. Not insane. Careful. There's a difference. You've always noticed details other people ignore. It's why you're great at design, and it's why you've caught onto this before it smacked you in the face. Her calmness annoyed me a little. I wanted her to laugh, to tell me I was being paranoid, to reassure me I was inventing problems. Instead, she was validating every fear I had been trying to bury. "I don't want to believe it," I said. "No one does," she answered simply. "But ignoring it won't make it go away. You're already connecting dots, Emily. You wouldn't be doing that if your gut wasn't screaming at you." Her words sank in as I stared at the cafe window, watching people hustle down the sidewalk. Couples passed, hands linked, smiling like they had no idea the ground could split under them at any second. Claire leaned closer. "Look, I've seen this before. My cousin thought her husband was working late. Turns out he was spending nights at another woman's apartment. You know what tipped her off? A damn dog hair on his jacket. They didn't even own a dog." He blinked. "A dog hair?" "Yeah. A single dog hair. Tiny, stupid detail. But it was real. And it blew everything open. Sometimes that's all it takes, a crack in the story. The shampoo bottle is your dog hair." The way she said it made my stomach turn. I sipped my coffee, though I couldn't taste it anymore. Claire wasn't being dramatic, she was being honest. She wasn't the type to stir paranoia. If anything, she was blunt to the point of rudeness. And right now, she was telling me what I already knew but didn't want to say out loud. I had to take this seriously. "Don't start a fight without proof," she added, softening a little. "But don't let him make you feel crazy either. If your instincts are ringing, listen." I nodded, but inside I was spiraling. The thought of Brian lying to me, betraying me, was so ugly I didn't want to put words to it. Yet, my best friend sitting across from me had just confirmed that this wasn't a fantasy in my head. We finished our coffee in silence, both of us pretending to check our phones. Before she left, Claire squeezed my hand. "Promise me you won't brush it off. You owe yourself the truth." That night, I lay awake listening to the faint hum of Brian's snoring. I stared at the ceiling, Claire's voice echoing in my head. "The shampoo bottle is your dog hair." It was such a ridiculous phrase, but it stuck. Because she was right, sometimes the truth hides in something small, something you almost ignore. The next morning, I watched Brian shave. He hummed to himself, cheerful, as if nothing in the world was wrong. I studied his reflection in the mirror, searching for signs of guilt. He caught me staring and winked, like we were still the happy couple everyone thought we were. I forced a smile, then looked down at the sink where his razor sat next to a new aftershave I hadn't seen before. "You bought a new one?" I asked casually. "Yeah, picked it up yesterday. Needed a change," he said, rinsing his face. It was small, but my brain filed it away automatically. Another change, another detail. At work, my sketches blurred on the page as I thought about Claire's warning. I replayed her tone, the certainty in her voice. She wasn't telling me to accuse him. She was telling me to trust myself. And that's what scared me most, because deep down, I already did. That evening, Brian came home later than usual. He tossed his keys on the counter, kissed the top of my head, and launched into a story about a chaotic shoot that ran long. I nodded along, but the whole time I thought about the towels, the perfume, the phone, the new aftershave. The story sounded polished, practiced. When he turned his back to grab a beer from the fridge, I pulled out my notebook and slid it under a magazine on the counter. I wrote one line quickly. "Late again. Story about shoot. Smell of perfume faint." Then I tucked it away before he noticed. At dinner, he cracked jokes, asked about my day, and I answered automatically. But my mind wasn't in the conversation anymore. I was watching, recording, waiting. Claire's words had lit a fuse inside me. I wasn't going to ignore the signs anymore. I wasn't going to let myself be pacified with vague excuses. If Brian was hiding something, I would find it. The shampoo bottle had started it, but now I saw the pattern stretching across our whole life. And once you see the pattern, you can't go back to pretending it's random. I waited until Brian left for the office the next morning before I acted. The house was quiet except for the hum of the fridge. My hands shook a little as I grabbed the shampoo bottle from the shower shelf and set it on the counter. I'd already been obsessing over it for days, weighing it in my palm, tilting it under the light, running through every possibility. Maybe I used more than I thought. Maybe Brian had suddenly developed a taste for herbal shampoo after 16 years of hating it. Or maybe someone else's hands had twisted that cap open while I wasn't home. The last thought had kept me awake at night, staring at the ceiling while Brian slept soundly beside me. So that morning, I pulled a fine-tip Sharpie out of my desk drawer and drew a small line on the back of the bottle, right where the liquid Saturday. A secret marker, invisible unless you looked for it. My proof system. I set the bottle back in the exact same spot, labels perfectly facing forward. Then I stepped back, exhaling like I'd just planted evidence in a crime scene. Because that's exactly what it felt like. I wasn't just doubting anymore. I was investigating. For the rest of the day, I couldn't focus on work. My laptop sat open with mock-ups of a new client's website, but all I saw was that shampoo bottle. Every email notification felt like a distraction from the only thing that mattered, whether the level would drop without me touching it. That evening, Brian came home, smiling like everything was fine. He asked if I wanted Thai takeout, and I said sure. We ate pad thai and spring rolls on the couch, while he told me about some production manager who forgot to book a lighting truck. I nodded in all the right places, but my mind wasn't with him. Later, when he went upstairs to shower, I sat on the couch, so still I barely breathed. The sound of water rushing through the pipes felt deafening. I pictured him reaching for the bottle, unscrewing the cap. Did he notice the line I'd drawn? Did he care? When he finally came back downstairs, his hair damp and smelling faintly of his regular body wash, I excused myself to the bathroom. My heart hammered as I checked. The line I had marked was lower. Not by much, maybe half an inch. But it was lower. I stared at it, pulse in my throat, the Sharpie line taunting me like a witness. He didn't use that shampoo. He hated it. Someone else had. The realization came with a rush of heat, almost nausea. I leaned against the counter, gripping the edge until my knuckles went white. There was no denying it now. My paranoia wasn't paranoia. The next few days, I refined my system. I weighed the bottle on the kitchen scale when Brian wasn't looking. I checked the placement of every item on the shower shelf. I even snapped pictures on my phone so I could compare. Each time, I found proof that someone else had been there. The towels were always slightly damp even when I hadn't showered. A faint scent of perfume clung to the air. Once, I even found a strand of hair lighter, shorter than mine, stuck to the tile. I picked it up with tweezers and dropped it in a small Ziploc bag like I was building a case file. I wasn't just Emily the wife anymore. I was Emily the detective, the woman who was going to expose the truth if it killed her. Claire called one afternoon to check in. I didn't tell her about the Sharpie line or the Ziploc bag. Not yet. She already thought I was sharp. I didn't want her to think I'd lost my mind. But she knew. She heard it in my voice. "You've got something, don't you?" "Let's just say," I answered carefully, "I'm not imagining things anymore." She paused. "Emily, be smart. Don't do anything that'll blow back on you. If he's lying, he'll bury himself. Just make sure you've got what you need when he does." Her words stuck with me, but my anger was louder. Every smile Brian gave me, every casual kiss on the cheek felt like a lie. Every time his phone buzzed face down on the table, I wanted to snatch it and scroll until I found what I already knew. But instead, I went back to the shampoo bottle. I bought a new one and poured a little of it out, replacing it with a mixture of water and conditioner to keep the texture the same. Then I marked it again. The thought running through my head was simple. If someone was arrogant enough to use my things in my own house, then they deserved whatever trap I set. By the end of that week, I didn't feel like the same woman who used to laugh at Brian's dumb jokes over takeout. I felt sharper, colder. My marriage wasn't a home anymore. It was an investigation scene. The half-empty shampoo bottle wasn't just evidence of betrayal, it was the first weapon in my revenge. The house was quiet again when it happened. A Thursday afternoon, Brian claimed he had a late meeting with the crew, and I sat at my desk pretending to finish a client's ad design. But my brain wasn't on color palettes or fonts. My eyes kept drifting to the clock, counting the hours until I could check the bathroom without him hovering nearby. When the garage door finally groaned shut behind him, I went straight upstairs. My heart was pounding like I was breaking into my own house. I opened the bathroom door and saw it instantly. The shampoo bottle was lighter, the Sharpie line exposed just below the surface. Not a millimeter off, nearly 2 inches gone. My throat tightened. I held the bottle up to the light, shaking it gently. I hadn't touched it since I marked it. Brian sure as hell hadn't touched it, he wouldn't go near the stuff. Which left only one explanation. She had been here. I sat on the edge of the tub, gripping the bottle like it might explode. The silence of the house pressed in on me. There was no denying it anymore. This wasn't a suspicion, wasn't just a paranoia spiral. Someone had stood right where I was sitting, showering with my water, using my shampoo. The thought made me nauseous. I wanted to scream, but instead I snapped a picture on my phone bottle, line, date, proof. That night, when Brian came home smiling like nothing was wrong, I stared at him differently. His hair was damp, his clothes neat, his voice light as he told me about a camera crew that couldn't get the sound mix right. He kissed me on the forehead, and all I could think was, "Did you kiss her like this too?" I nodded, asked questions, pretended like I cared about the story. But inside, the Sharpie line burned in my head like a neon sign. The next day, I doubled down. I installed a new Ring camera in the hallway, angled just so it caught the entryway to the bathroom. If someone else stepped foot in that shower, I wanted it on record. For 2 days, nothing happened. The shampoo level stayed the same. The camera caught nothing unusual. I almost started to think maybe it had ended. Maybe she wasn't coming back. Then, on the third afternoon, while Brian texted me from his meeting, my phone buzzed with a motion alert. I froze. Hands shaking, I pulled up the live feed. And there she was. Blonde, mid-30s, in a fitted coat and heels, moving through my house like she belonged there. She set her purse on my console table, glanced around casually, and disappeared down the hallway toward the bathroom. I sat at my desk, staring at the screen, rage boiling up so fast I thought I'd pass out. My house. My shampoo. My husband. I watched the minutes tick by until she reappeared, hair damp, face glowing like she'd just stepped out of a spa. She grabbed her purse, checked her phone, and walked out the front door like nothing was wrong. The bile in my throat was so strong I had to cover my mouth. This wasn't paranoia anymore. This was proof in high definition. I saved the clip, then sat back in my chair trembling. Every doubt I'd had, every time I'd second-guessed myself, all of it vanished. The truth was right in front of me. Brian was cheating. And he wasn't even smart about it. That evening, when he came home, I could barely look at him. He tossed his keys on the counter, kissed my cheek, and said he was starving. I kept my voice steady, asking him about work, nodding at the right times. But inside, I was screaming. After dinner, while he scrolled through his phone with that smug little half-smile, I slipped into the bedroom, opened my laptop, and replayed the Ring footage. I stared at her face, her blonde hair damp, her hand casually brushing against my walls like she owned them. Claire's words echoed. "The shampoo bottle is your dog hair." She was right. The shampoo had led me to this, to undeniable evidence. I sat back in the dark, laptop glow, lighting my face, and realized something important. It wasn't enough to know. It wasn't enough to be sure. Brian had been lying to me, parading this woman through my house, humiliating me under my own roof. He wasn't going to get away with it. The Sharpie line had cracked the surface. The Ring camera had pulled back the curtain, but this was just the first breakthrough. Now that I had proof, it was only a matter of what I would do with it. And for the first time since the doubts began, I didn't feel crazy or powerless. I felt dangerous. The morning after I saved that Ring clip, I couldn't look at myself in the mirror without feeling like two different women were staring back. One was the Emily who had built a business, who went to yoga on Tuesdays, who baked banana bread on weekends. The other was a stranger holding evidence of betrayal like a weapon. I sat at the kitchen table, laptop open to the frozen frame of her walking out of my house. My coffee went cold. My hands wouldn't stop trembling. Rage and clarity tangled together, and I realized if I didn't talk to someone, I'd drown in it. That's how I ended up sitting in a small office off West End Avenue, across from Dr. Ellen Moore. Her shelves were lined with psychology books and a jar of peppermints, the kind of detail that normally would have calmed me. That day, it didn't. She folded her hands and asked, "Why are you here, Emily?" The words stuck in my throat. I'd spent weeks bottling it up, carrying the secret like a stone in my chest. Finally, I just said it. "I think my husband is cheating on me." No, scratch that. "I know he is." Her face didn't change, but her voice softened. "What makes you so sure?" I slid my phone across the table. The video clip played, the blonde woman moving through my home like it was hers. Dr. Moore watched quietly, then set the phone down. That must feel like a violation. "Violation doesn't even begin to cover it," I snapped. "She's in my shower, using my shampoo, smiling while she ruins my life." Dr. Moore nodded. "You've been documenting." "Yes," I admitted. "Notes, photos, marks on bottles, camera footage. I needed proof. Otherwise, he'd call me paranoid. He'd twist it." "Gaslighting," she said calmly. "It's common when there's deception. But you're not imagining things, Emily. You've gathered evidence, and it's real." The validation hit me harder than I expected. Tears welled up, hot and humiliating, and I wiped them away with the back of my hand. "What do I do now?" I whispered. "That depends on what you want," she said. "You could confront him with the evidence. You could seek legal counsel before tipping your hand, or you could continue observing until you feel ready. But the key is this. You need to protect yourself emotionally and financially before you act. Don't let anger make the decisions for you." Her words sank into me like weights. Protect yourself. Plan. Don't just react. By the time I left her office, I had more than fury, I had a strategy forming. At home, Brian was already back from work, standing at the counter, pouring himself a glass of wine like he hadn't just detonated my world. He asked about my day, smiling, and I gave him the blandest version I could. Meetings, deadlines, nothing special. Meanwhile, my mind was cataloging every detail. His phone stayed face down on the counter. His shirt smelled faintly of perfume that wasn't mine. He laughed a little too hard at his own joke. I smiled back, but inside, I was locking pieces into place. That night, lying awake beside him, I thought about Dr. Moore's advice. I couldn't storm into the living room, slam down the footage, and scream. That would only give him the chance to twist, deny, or even erase the evidence before I could use it. No. If Brian wanted to treat our marriage like a stage play, then fine, I'd play my role. Quiet, supportive, unsuspecting, all while I prepared my exit. Over the next week, I became an actress in my own home. I laughed at his jokes, cooked his favorite meals, kissed him goodnight. And every time, I filed away more details. The late nights, the sudden grooming habits, the lies told with ease. When he left, I copied financial records from the office cabinet. I quietly checked our joint accounts, noting withdrawals he hadn't mentioned. I even called a lawyer just for a consultation. Howard Blake, downtown. Calm voice, sharp eyes, exactly the kind of person you wanted in your corner when things went to war. "Don't confront him yet," Howard told me flatly. "Gather everything first. Texts, footage, finances. We'll need it. When you go in with leverage. That's how you win." So that's what I did. My house, once a place of comfort, became a collection site. Every receipt, every unexplained expense, every inconsistency, it all went into a neat folder I kept hidden in my closet. On the outside, I was Emily the wife. On the inside, I was Emily the strategist. One evening, Brian poured us both wine and asked if I wanted to plan a trip, said he'd been thinking about a getaway. I smiled, clinked my glass with his, and nodded like it was the best idea he'd ever had. But in my head I thought, yes, let's plan a trip. A one-way trip for you, out of my life. Dr. Moore was right. Protect yourself, then act. And every step I took brought me closer to the moment when Brian would realize the half-empty shampoo bottle hadn't just exposed his affair. It had started the countdown to his downfall. The folder in my closet kept growing heavier, even though it was only paper. Bank statements, printed emails, screenshots of text notifications I'd glimpsed on his phone, the ring footage all neatly stacked. Every piece of evidence made me feel both vindicated and sick. Vindicated because I wasn't crazy. Sick because this was my life, not a courtroom drama. At first, I thought gathering proof would make me feel stronger. Instead, it began to hollow me out. Each time I slid another document into that folder, a piece of my marriage slid away with it. The strain seeped into everything. At work, my designs lost their spark. Clients asked for revisions, and I stared blankly at the screen, struggling to care about color choices when my own home was a crime scene. Claire noticed immediately. "You look exhausted," she said one afternoon when we met for lunch. I shrugged. "Work's busy." "Don't lie to me." She narrowed her eyes. "It's him, isn't it?" I didn't answer. Instead, I stirred my iced tea and thought about how many nights I'd stayed awake replaying the ring footage like it was a horror movie. Claire reached across the table. "Emily, if the proof is eating you alive, maybe you don't need more of it. Maybe you already know enough." "Oh?" Her words sat heavy, but I couldn't let go. Knowing enough felt too vague. I needed everything nailed down, airtight, undeniable, not just for me, for when he inevitably tried to weasel out with excuses. That evening, Brian came home in his usual whirlwind, tossed his keys, kissed my cheek, opened the fridge like nothing was wrong. He started talking about a new project in Dallas, how it could mean more nights away. I nodded and smiled, but my eyes darted to the trash bin, where I saw a crumpled receipt poking out. After he went upstairs, I pulled it out. A boutique hotel 2 miles from his office. 1 night stay, 2 dinners charged to the room. I smoothed the paper flat, my hands trembling, then slid it into the folder. By the time I zipped that folder shut, the weight in my chest was unbearable. I wasn't just collecting evidence anymore, I was suffocating under it. The next morning, Dr. Moore asked me a simple question. "When will you feel like you have enough proof?" I froze. I wanted to say, "When I can't deny it." But I already couldn't deny it. I wanted to say, "When he admits it." But I knew Brian well enough to know he'd lie until his last breath. She leaned forward gently. "Emily, evidence can protect you, but don't let it consume you. At some point, the need to know turns into a cage. You're allowed to stop building the case and start deciding what to do with it." Her words stung because they were true. The folder was no longer just a tool, it was a burden I carried everywhere. That week, the tension at home hit a boiling point. Brian came in late again, smelling faintly of perfume that wasn't mine. He dropped onto the couch, flipping through channels, and I stood in the doorway watching him. "You okay?" he asked casually, not even glancing up. I forced a smile. "Yeah, just tired," his quote. But inside, I wanted to scream. How do you sit there like everything is normal? How do you lie so easily? Instead, I turned away, poured myself a glass of water, and took a deep breath. The folder was waiting upstairs, thick with proof. It was time to admit the truth. I wasn't gathering anymore. I was preparing. The following day, I met with Howard Blake again. I spread the folder across his desk, every page lined up like exhibits in court. He flipped through calmly, nodding. "You've built a strong case. Financial infidelity, physical evidence, even video. He won't be able to deny it. If you want out, Emily, we can make this fast and clean." Hearing him say it out loud made my chest tighten. Fast and clean sounded surgical. My life reduced to paperwork and signatures. But part of me felt lighter, too. Howard wasn't horrified by my evidence. He was impressed. My paranoia had become undeniable fact, and now it had legal weight. Driving home, I gripped the steering wheel until my knuckles whitened. This wasn't just about betrayal anymore. It was about reclaiming control. Every piece of proof I'd gathered wasn't just a reminder of pain, it was ammunition. That night, I tucked the folder back into the closet and stood there staring at it. The weight hadn't disappeared, but it had shifted. It no longer felt like a cage. It felt like leverage. Downstairs, Brian called out for me, his voice cheerful, like we were still the couple people envied. I took a deep breath, forced my face into something neutral, and walked down the stairs. Because now, I wasn't just a wife doubting her husband. I was a woman holding the truth in her hands, and sooner or later, I was going to use it. I stood at the sink, rinsing a coffee mug when Brian walked in, whistling like a man without a care in the world. He set his phone down face down on the counter and leaned over to kiss me. I froze. The touch, once automatic, now felt like an act. The folder in my closet had grown too heavy to ignore. I had enough evidence to choke a jury, and Howard Blake had assured me it was more than sufficient to file for divorce. But before I signed anything, before lawyers and paperwork, I needed something from Brian, the truth out of his mouth. I dried the mug slowly, watching him through the corner of my eye. He poured himself a glass of water, humming. "You look tense," he said, glancing at me. "Do I?" I answered, voice steady but cold. He frowned a little. "You've been off lately. Work stress?" I put the mug down harder than I intended. "Something like that." He studied me, but only for a second, then shrugged it off and reached for his phone. That was the final straw. 16 years of marriage, and he couldn't even fake curiosity about what was bothering me. "Brian?" I said sharply. He paused, phone halfway in his hand. "We need to talk." His smile faltered, just slightly, but he covered it quickly. "Talk about what?" I leaned against the counter, folding my arms. My heart hammered, but my voice came out calm. "About what's been happening in this house." He blinked, feigning confusion like it was a role he'd rehearsed. "What do you mean?" I walked past him, opened the closet in the hall, and pulled out the folder. My hands were steady now. I set it on the counter between us with a soft thud. He looked at it, then at me. "What's this?" "Proof," I said flatly. His laugh was short, too quick. "Proof of what? Emily, this is getting ridiculous." I cut him off. "Of your affair. Of her in my house. Of the shampoo, the hotel receipts, the camera footage. Do you want me to keep going?" The room went dead silent. Brian's face drained of color. For the first time in weeks, maybe months, he wasn't the smooth production manager spinning stories. He was cornered. He swallowed, his jaw twitching. "Emily, it's not what you think." I barked a laugh, bitter and sharp. "Don't insult me. Don't you dare stand there and pretend I'm crazy." His shoulders sagged. He didn't reach for the folder, didn't try to flip through the evidence. He knew. He knew it was airtight. I pressed on, my voice rising. 16 years, Brian. 16 years of marriage and you bring someone into my house? Into my bathroom? Do you know how sick that is? He dragged a hand down his face, finally muttering, "It was a mistake." "A mistake?" My chest burned. Mistakes are forgetting an anniversary dinner. Mistakes are saying the wrong name once. What you did was calculated. You snuck her in here. You let her use my things. You thought I'd never notice. His voice cracked. "I didn't want to hurt you." "Oh." I slammed my hand against the counter. "You didn't want to get caught." He flinched, and for a moment, I thought he might cry. But I didn't care. My own tears had dried weeks ago, replaced by something colder. He finally whispered, "It's over now." I stared at him, disgust crawling up my throat. "Over? You think saying it's over fixes this? Do you even understand what you've done? You've turned our marriage into a lie. You've made me a stranger in my own home. And..." His eyes darted to the folder again. He shifted, restless, but still didn't touch it, because he knew the truth sat in there like dynamite. I took a step closer, lowering my voice, but sharpening every word. "You underestimated me. You thought I'd look the other way, believe your excuses, let you run around while I kept the house warm. But you forgot who I am. I don't ignore patterns. I don't stay silent when the truth is screaming in my face." Brian finally looked up, meeting my eyes. For the first time, there was no smugness, no charm, just fear. "Emily," he said softly, almost pleading. We can fix this. I shook my head slowly. No, Brian, you broke it. And I don't fix things that are rotten to the core. The air between us was heavy, the kind that makes your chest ache. He opened his mouth like he wanted to argue, but no words came. I closed the folder, slid it back into my arms, and turned toward the stairs. My voice carried over my shoulder, steady as stone. This isn't just about an affair, it's about respect. And you lost mine the second she stepped into my shower. Brian didn't follow me. He stayed frozen at the counter, the sound of my footsteps climbing the stairs echoing through the house we'd built together. And for the first time since this began, I felt the power shift. Not to him, to me. Brian sat slumped at the kitchen counter, his hands gripping the edge like the laminate was the only thing holding him up. I stood across from him, folder pressed against my chest, the weight of every page like a shield. For a long stretch, neither of us spoke. The only sound was the tick of the wall clock, steady and merciless. Finally, he broke the silence. Emily, please, it wasn't what you think. You've blown this up in your head. I laughed sharp, humorless. Really? Because what I think is that my husband invited another woman into my home and let her parade around like she owned it. What I think is that you humiliated me under my own roof. So if I've blown it up, Brian, maybe you should ask yourself why there was anything to blow up in the first place. He rubbed his temples, avoiding my eyes. It wasn't serious. She means nothing. It was just a distraction. A distraction? I set the folder down on the counter with a thud. So what am I? Furniture? Something you get bored of after 16 years? His face twisted, a flicker of anger surfacing. Don't turn this into something it's not. Oh, I'm sorry, I snapped, leaning forward. Is there a way to turn video footage of a blonde woman leaving my house into something it's not? Is there a way to explain her hair in my shower, her perfume on your shirt, her signature on a hotel receipt? Please, Brian, enlighten me. For a moment, he looked like a man caught in headlights. Then the lies spilled out fast, clumsy. She came over to talk about work. We had a project together. She just needed a shower after a long day. Stop. My voice cracked like a whip. Don't you dare insult me with that garbage. Who showers in a coworker's house? Who sneaks in when the wife's not home? Try again. His mouth opened, then closed. His eyes darted to the counter, the floor, anywhere but me. I pressed on, relentless. You've been lying for months, hiding behind late meetings, business trips, phone calls you wouldn't take in front of me. You thought I wouldn't notice, but I noticed everything. And you know what? The lies aren't even the worst part. It's that you stood here every night, ate dinner with me, kissed me goodnight, all while making me feel crazy for trusting my gut. He finally looked up, his voice breaking. I didn't mean for it to happen. I scoffed. You didn't mean? What? She tripped and fell into our shower? Her clothes accidentally ended up on the bathroom floor? It just happened, he said weakly, running both hands through his hair. I didn't plan it. The words sliced me open. It just happened. Like our marriage was a pothole he stumbled into. Like 16 years of love and trust could be tossed aside with a shrug. My chest tightened, but I forced my voice steady. No, Brian. Affairs don't just happen. You make a choice. You made it every time you texted her behind my back. Every time you lied about a meeting. Every time you let her touch the life we built together. Don't stand there and tell me you lost control. You had plenty of control. You just didn't care. For once, he didn't argue. He just stared at me, face pale, mouth pressed in a thin line. The silence stretched, heavy and suffocating. I could feel the truth hanging between us now. Undeniable, raw. And for the first time, I saw him not as my husband, but as a stranger. I picked up the folder again, holding it close. You wanted to keep lying? You can't anymore. It's all here. You can't twist this. You can't gaslight me into thinking I imagined it. The truth is right here, and you're looking at the woman who refuses to be fooled any longer. His shoulders slumped, and he whispered, Emily, I love you. I don't want to lose you. Something inside me snapped. I slammed the folder shut so hard he flinched. Love? Don't you dare use that word. Love is trust. Love is respect. Love isn't letting another woman shower in my home and then crawling into bed with me like nothing happened. Don't stand there and poison the word love with your lies. He tried to reach for me, his hand half extended, but I stepped back. Don't. The look on his face was pitiful fear, guilt, desperation, but it didn't touch me anymore. He had drained me dry, and now all that was left was clarity. I gathered the folder and headed for the stairs. My voice was calm, almost too calm. You wanted the truth to stay hidden, but the half-empty shampoo bottle ruined your little play. And now, Brian, the show is over. He didn't follow. He just sat there, staring at the table where the evidence had been spread. And for me, the weight that had been crushing my chest for weeks finally began to lift, because the lies were over. The excuses were dead. And the truth was mine to hold, not his to bury. The morning after our confrontation, I didn't linger in the kitchen or pretend to make small talk. I grabbed my bag, tucked the folder of evidence inside, and drove straight to Howard Blake's office downtown. Howard's receptionist led me to his glass-walled conference room. He was already seated at the long table, jacket off, sleeves rolled up like a man ready for battle. He stood when I walked in, gestured toward the chair across from him, and said simply, "You look like you're ready." "I am," I replied, setting the folder on the table. Howard flipped through the pages quickly, receipts, photos, screenshots, the ring footage still frame. He didn't flinch, didn't gasp, didn't look at me with pity. He just nodded, professional and steady. "This is strong. With this, we can argue infidelity, asset protection, even damages if we push. You've done the hard work, Emily. Now let's put it to use." For the first time in weeks, I felt like someone was firmly in my corner. Not a friend trying to comfort me, not a therapist talking about emotions. This was strategy. Cold, clean strategy. Howard leaned forward. "First step, we file for divorce immediately. Second, we request a freeze on joint accounts to prevent him from moving money. Third, we prepare for him to fight dirty. Affairs like this rarely stay quiet once lawyers are involved." I nodded, my hands clasped tightly in my lap. "I don't care if it gets ugly. He already made it ugly." Howard gave me a sharp smile. "Good, then we're on the same page." By the time I left his office, the papers were drafted and the process had begun. My name was on the top line as petitioner. Brian's name sat below as respondent. 16 years of marriage reduced to black ink on white paper. It stung, but it also freed me. Driving home, I rehearsed in my head what I'd say when Brian inevitably discovered the papers. I expected rage, denials, maybe tears. What I didn't expect was how fast the legal hammer would fall. That evening, when he came home, the mood was different. He was quieter, edgy. He looked at me like he knew something had shifted, but couldn't quite name it. Over dinner, he talked about work, but his voice was forced. Finally, he put his fork down and asked, "You've been seeing someone, haven't you? A lawyer?" I stared at him, unfazed. "Yes." His face twisted, a flash of panic. "You can't be serious, Emily. Divorce? Over one mistake?" "One mistake?" I leaned forward, my voice low and sharp. "You call months of sneaking around, lying, bringing another woman into my house a mistake? No, Brian. This isn't one mistake. This is who you are, and I'm done living with it. Howend." He ran his hands through his hair, standing abruptly. "We can fix this. We can go to counseling, start fresh." I cut him off. "I already went to counseling. By myself. You were too busy with her." That shut him up. His shoulders slumped, and he stared at the floor. "The papers are filed," I said evenly. "Our accounts are frozen. You'll hear from Howard by Monday." His head snapped up. "You froze the accounts?" "Yes. Did you think I wouldn't protect myself? After all, you've been withdrawing money without telling me." For once, Brian had no comeback. He just stood there, pale and cornered. That night, he slept in the guest room. Or at least he tried. I heard him pacing, muttering under his breath, opening drawers as if he'd find some escape route tucked between old linens. I lay in our bed, calm for the first time in months. The next few days were chaos. Howard moved fast, and Brian's lawyer fired back with letters full of bluster. But every time they tried to argue, Howard slid my evidence across the table, and the fight drained out of them. Hotel receipts. Video footage. Account withdrawals. It was ironclad. Brian grew more desperate at home. He swung between begging and shouting. One night, he swore he loved me more than anyone. The next, he cursed me for ruining his career. I let him rant. I didn't need his words anymore. I had the truth, and soon I'd have my freedom. Claire dropped by with takeout one evening, and I told her about the papers being filed. She hugged me tight and whispered, "I'm proud of you." For the first time, I actually believed it. It wasn't just about ending the marriage. It was about reclaiming myself. Every document signed, every court filing made me stronger. I wasn't the woman crying in the bathroom over a blonde hair anymore. I was the woman who had turned that hair into a weapon, who had taken back control from a man who thought he could outsmart me. And as Brian's panic grew, mine faded. He could beg, he could threaten, he could scream. None of it mattered. The law was on my side. The truth was on my side. The half-empty shampoo bottle hadn't just revealed his affair, it had opened the door to my revenge, and I was walking through it without looking back. The legal process gave me control, but it didn't give me peace. Every time I walked into the grocery store or grabbed coffee in the neighborhood, I felt eyes on me. People didn't know the details yet, but they sensed something had cracked. In a suburb like ours, silence is louder than words. One afternoon, Jack Turner, a reporter from the Nashville Chronicle, called me. At first, I almost hung up. My stomach clenched at the thought of strangers dissecting my private humiliation. But then I remembered Brian's smug face, the way he'd minimized everything, the way he had expected me to swallow my pride and keep quiet. Jack's voice was steady, not pushy. "Emily, I'm not here to exploit you. I've covered scandals for years. But this isn't just gossip. Your story could help other women see they're not crazy when something feels off. I'd like to hear it in your words if you're willing." I sat at the kitchen table staring at the half-empty coffee cup in front of me. The house was too quiet, the kind of quiet that presses down until you can't breathe. For weeks, Brian had controlled the narrative: late meetings, harmless work dinners, a mistake. If I stayed silent, he'd keep controlling it. I finally said, "Fine. But only if you write it the way I tell it." When we met, Jack didn't take out a camera or shove a recorder in my face. He just sat across from me in a small cafe downtown, notepad in hand. His first words were, "Tell me when it started." "Hooah." So I told him. About the blonde hair in the shower. About the shampoo bottle dropping lower each day. About the Sharpie line, the ring footage, the folder of evidence. My voice shook at first, but as I spoke, something shifted. I wasn't just recounting humiliation, I was documenting betrayal. Jack listened quietly, scribbling notes. When I paused, he asked gentle questions. "How did it feel when you saw her on camera? What went through your mind when he denied it?" He didn't treat me like gossip. He treated me like someone telling the truth after being silenced too long. By the time I finished, my coffee was cold and my throat was raw. Jack closed his notepad and said, "Thank you. People need to hear this. You're stronger than you think." 2 days later, my phone buzzed with notifications before I'd even finished breakfast. The Chronicle had published the piece, "The Half-Empty Shampoo Bottle, a Nashville Woman's Story of Betrayal and Revenge." The article spread fast. Neighbors shared it, coworkers whispered, strangers emailed me messages of support. Some said they had lived through the same thing, catching cheating husbands through details as small as a perfume scent or a stray receipt. Others praised me for not staying silent. Brian, on the other hand, exploded. He stormed into the house, waving a printout of the article. "How could you? You've humiliated me in front of the entire city." I stared at him, calm. "Good. Now you know how it feels." His face turned red, and for a second, I thought he might throw the paper at me. But then he saw the look on my face, the unshakable calm that comes from knowing the truth is out, and he dropped it on the counter instead. "You'll regret this, Emily," he muttered. But he was wrong. I didn't regret it. Not for a second. The fallout was brutal for him. His company put him on indefinite leave. The actress he'd been seeing cut ties once the scandal hit the tabloids. His reputation in Nashville's entertainment circles crumbled overnight. Meanwhile, I walked into my studio on Music Row and found clients waiting with flowers, saying, "Good for you. You deserve better." Claire hugged me so hard I thought my ribs might crack. Even Dr. Moore emailed me, "Proud of you for taking back your voice." But the biggest surprise came from strangers. Women I'd never met stopped me in stores, telling me, "Your story gave me courage to confront my husband," or, "I thought I was paranoid too, but now I know I'm not alone." It didn't erase the pain, but it transformed it into something useful. My humiliation became someone else's warning. My revenge wasn't about destroying Brian anymore, it was about refusing to let him destroy me. That night, I sat on the balcony with a glass of wine, scrolling through the article on my phone. My name was there in black and white, no longer buried under his excuses. For the first time in months, I felt like I could breathe. Brian sulked in the guest room, slamming doors and pacing, but his anger no longer touched me. The story was out, the silence was broken, and no matter what he did next, he couldn't take that away. The half-empty shampoo bottle had started as a detail no one would believe mattered. Now it was a headline, and I realized that was my victory, not just exposing him, but proving that the smallest truth, if you hold on to it, can bring down the biggest lie. The weeks following the article felt like living in two different worlds. On one side, I was still untangling the wreckage of my marriage. On the other, I was watching my story ripple out into the city, like a rock dropped into water. Everywhere I went, I caught whispers, some sympathetic, some judgmental, all reminding me that nothing about my life was private anymore. At the grocery store, two women by the produce section glanced at me, then whispered behind their hands. I grabbed apples, lifted my chin, and kept walking. At a coffee shop, the barista hesitated before handing me my drink, her eyes flicking over me as though she knew every detail. It was strange. I used to blend into the background, another woman in yoga pants ordering a latte. Now I was that woman, the one who caught her cheating husband with a shampoo bottle, the one whose revenge had been splashed across headlines. At first, it was exhausting. I hated being the center of gossip. But then, something unexpected happened. Emails began flooding in from women across the country. Strangers who had read the article wrote things like, "I thought I was crazy too, but your story made me realize I'm not alone." Or, "Your courage gave me the push to finally leave him." Reading those messages, I felt something shift inside me. What had begun as humiliation was turning into solidarity. My pain had become a voice other women recognized as their own. Meanwhile, Brian's life was unraveling. He moved into a small apartment downtown, his career on ice after sponsors pulled out of projects. Claire heard from a friend in the film industry that people didn't want his name attached to anything anymore. Too toxic, too much baggage. He called me a few times, left voicemails alternating between angry rants and pitiful apologies. I didn't answer. I had nothing left to say. My lawyer handled the legal back and forth. I didn't need to hear his voice anymore. One afternoon, Claire came over with Thai takeout, like she always did when I needed comfort. We sat at the kitchen table, cartons spread out, chopsticks in hand. "You know," she said, "you could have handled this quietly. Filed for divorce, kept it private. But you didn't. You told the whole world. And honestly, Emily, I think that's why you're healing faster than I expected." I raised an eyebrow. "Faster?" She shrugged. "You're still angry, sure, still hurt. But you're not hiding. You're not pretending. You ripped the bandage off, let the wound breathe. That takes guts." Her words sat with me long after she left. Maybe she was right. Silence had been killing me. Speaking out loudly, publicly was messy, but it was also freeing. Of course, it wasn't without consequences. Some people online criticized me for airing dirty laundry. Others accused me of exaggerating for attention. At first, those comments stung. But then I realized those people didn't know me. They didn't live in my house, didn't see the shampoo line sinking lower, didn't watch another woman walk out of their bathroom. Their opinions didn't matter. Dr. Moore reminded me of that during our sessions. "Healing isn't about winning everyone's approval," she said. "It's about reclaiming your own story. And you've done that." The business, my studio on Music Row, became my sanctuary. My clients didn't treat me like gossip, they treated me like a professional. They kept bringing me work, trusting me with big projects, and slowly, I started to feel like myself again. Some even admitted they admired how I handled things. One client said, "Emily, you turned a betrayal into a brand of strength." That stuck with me. Strength. I didn't always feel strong, especially on the nights I lay awake replaying everything. But strength wasn't about not breaking, it was about standing back up after you had. Brian, meanwhile, was still unraveling. Word got around that the actress he'd been seeing cut ties the moment the scandal hit. She wanted nothing to do with him once her name became tabloid fodder. Claire showed me a headline one night. Starlet drops Nashville production manager amid affair scandal. I didn't gloat. I didn't even feel satisfaction. Just a flat sort of closure. He'd dug his grave, and now he was lying in it. At home, the silence became less oppressive. I repainted the bathroom new colors, new shelves, new towels. It felt like reclaiming the space piece by piece. I threw out the shampoo bottle that had started it all, not because I wanted to forget, but because I didn't need it anymore. The truth it revealed had already reshaped my life. One evening, sitting on my balcony with a glass of wine, I looked out over the city lights and thought about everything I'd lost and everything I'd gained. Yes, my marriage had imploded. Yes, I'd been humiliated, but I'd also found my voice. I'd connected with strangers who now felt less alone, and I'd proven to myself that even in betrayal, I could rise. The aftermath wasn't clean or easy, but it was real. And as the days turned into weeks, I realized something important. I was no longer waiting for the pain to end. I was living through it, learning from it, and slowly, building something stronger on the other side. Spring crept back into Nashville slowly, the kind of spring where pecan trees finally bloomed and the air smelled like fresh grass after months of gray. For me, it felt like the city was matching my own reset. The divorce was finalized, signed, stamped, and filed. 16 years of marriage had been reduced to a stack of papers in a cardboard box at the courthouse. I expected to feel broken when that envelope came in the mail. Instead, I felt relief. Not joy, not celebration, just the quiet release of something that had been pressing down on me for too long. The heaviness in my chest was gone, replaced by the kind of calm you get after surviving a storm. I started making changes, not big dramatic ones, but ones that made the house feel like mine again. The guest room that Brian had been sulking in was repainted a soft blue and turned into a studio space where I could sketch without distractions. The living room furniture got rearranged, like hitting a refresh button. And that bathroom, the stage of betrayal, was transformed. New tiles, new paint, fresh towels, and a shelf lined with products I actually liked. No Sharpie marks, no silent evidence, just me. Claire came over one Saturday with coffee and looked around, shaking her head. "Emily, this doesn't even feel like the same place anymore." "Good?" I said, smiling. "That's the point." I didn't talk much about Brian anymore. His name came up in the tabloids now and then, an industry project falling through, an appearance cancelled, but I didn't read past the headlines. He was no longer my problem, no longer my weight to carry. Instead, my life was filling with new things. My design studio was thriving. Clients kept coming, and a few even mentioned they'd sought me out specifically because they respected how I'd handled the scandal. It was strange to think betrayal could boost a career, but maybe people just liked working with someone who wouldn't settle for lies. And then there was Jack. We didn't start with anything dramatic. After the article came out, he checked in a few times, not as a reporter, but as a friend. One day, he texted, "Coffee, no notebook this time?" I hesitated, then said yes. We met at a small cafe on the west side, no interviews, no questions. Just two people talking about ordinary things. Books, music, the best food trucks in the city. It felt easy. Easier than I expected after everything I'd been through. At first, I kept my guard up. I told myself it was just coffee, just a way to remind myself I was still capable of connecting with someone. But over the weeks, coffee turned into walks through Centennial Park, into dinners at hole-in-the-wall restaurants, into evenings where we sat and talked until the place closed around us. One night, as we sat on a park bench watching the sun dip below the skyline, Jack said, "You know, most people would have hidden. You didn't. You stood up and said, 'This is the truth, and you don't get to bury me in lies.' That's rare." I didn't know how to respond at first. Compliments about my work I could handle, but compliments about my resilience felt too raw. Finally, I just said, "I didn't feel strong. I felt cornered. The only way out was to fight." "And if strength isn't about feeling it," he said. "It's about showing it anyway." Something about that stayed with me. I didn't know where things with Jack were heading, and for once, I didn't need to know. It was enough that his presence felt safe, honest, and real. No lies, no games. Just two people learning how to trust conversation by conversation. At home, I spent more time on my balcony in the evenings. I'd sit with a glass of wine, watching the sky turn pink and gold, listening to the city hum below. Sometimes I thought about the girl I'd been at 19, standing in a wedding dress convinced she'd found her forever. I wanted to tell her, "It won't last, but you'll survive, and you'll be stronger for it." The half-empty shampoo bottle was long gone, but I never forgot it. That tiny detail had exposed the biggest betrayal of my life. It had turned my world upside down, then given me the courage to reclaim it. The message I carried now was simple. Silence destroys, but truth sets you free. My story wasn't just about catching a cheating husband. It was about refusing to let someone else control the narrative of my life. As the sun set and the sky deepened into twilight, I whispered to myself, "It wasn't for nothing. Not a single day." And for the first time in years, I actually believed it. Looking back, I realized the half-empty shampoo bottle wasn't just about catching a cheating husband. It was about reclaiming my power in the middle of betrayal, refusing to let silence bury me, and showing that even the smallest detail can turn into the loudest truth. What started as one of the darkest chapters of my life became the moment I finally chose myself. That's what family revenge stories are really about, not just payback, but finding the strength to walk away, rebuild, and own your future. If you enjoy real family drama and powerful revenge stories like this one, make sure to subscribe to the channel and drop a comment below. I'd love to hear your thoughts and your own experiences.